Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, Tomorrow Revenge, where you can witness the power of women. Please follow us to hear today's story. The terminal buzzed with the chaotic symphony of rolling suitcases, flight announcements, and 1,000 separate conversations. I adjusted the strap of my carry-on, feeling the worn fabric under my fingers. 3 years since I'd been home, and it all came down to this. Standing in the bustling heart of JFK, trying to ignore the man beside me. "You're sure about this, Ames? Last chance." Declan's voice was smooth, laced with that particular brand of condescension only an older brother can master. He stood a little too straight in his tailored charcoal suit, the one that probably cost more than my car. His boarding pass, thick, creamy cardstock, peeked from the breast pocket. "First class, of course, I'm sure." "Declan, it's just a flight to Seattle." I kept my eyes on the departure board, watching the status of Alaska Airlines Flight 87 flicker. "On time. It's not just a flight. It's 7 hours, in a seat designed for someone 5 feet tall." He shook his head, a faint, pitying smile playing on his lips. "I told you, my firm has a deal with the airline. I could have upgraded you. Mom would have understood. Birthdays aren't exactly a national emergency." I clenched my jaw, feeling the familiar tension creep up my neck. "I don't need an upgrade. Economy is fine." "Economy?" He let the word hang, savoring it like a bad taste. "You know, there's a difference between being frugal and just punishing yourself. What is it you do for the government again? Administrative work? Paper pushing? Surely they pay you enough for a decent seat once in a while." I'd crafted the lie years ago. Simple, unremarkable. "I work in administrative support for the Department of Defense. A desk job, paperwork." It was easier that way, easier than the truth, which came with classified briefings, operational security, and the constant, low hum of vigilance. Easier than watching his eyes glaze over with a mixture of boredom and vague disappointment. "The pay is adequate. I save where I can. My standard deflection, right? For the future." He made air quotes. The gesture was annoyingly crisp. "Meanwhile, you're going to spend 7 hours with your knees in your chest, listening to a baby cry, while I'm sipping Krug in a pod that turns into a bed. But hey, you do you. This is your limit, I guess." The word limit hung in the air between us. It was his favorite theme. Declan, the golden boy, the hedge fund VP whose limit was the sky, the market, his own expanding ambition, and me, his younger sister Emily, whose limit was apparently the thin, scratchy fabric of an economy class seat. "It's a seat on a plane. Declan, it gets you from point A to point B. That's the point." My voice was tighter than I intended. "See, that's the mentality that keeps you where you are." He leaned in, lowering his voice as if sharing a great truth. A woman dragging a huge plaid suitcase bumped into me, muttering an apology. Declan didn't flinch. "Perception, Emily, it matters. You present yourself as someone who accepts the baseline, the minimum, and that's what the world gives you. You walk up to that economy line. You're announcing to everyone that you're not worth the extra $200. It's a statement." I looked at him then, really looked. The perfect haircut, the watch that was subtle but unmistakably expensive, the aura of entitlement that functioned like a force field. He lived in a world of statements, of cars, addresses, club memberships. My world was one of actions, of quiet competence, of things I could never, ever talk about. "I'm not making a statement. I'm getting on a plane to see our mother for her 60th birthday. In the cattle car." He sighed, a long-suffering exhalation. "Fine, have it your way. Just don't complain to me when your back is in knots. And for God's sake, don't tell Mom I let you fly back there. She'll blame me. Let me." The phrase sparked a hot, familiar anger in my gut. I quashed it. Old habit. The boarding call for first class echoed through the terminal. "That's me," Declan said, straightening his already straight tie. He gave me a once-over, taking in my simple jeans, plain sneakers, and the practical, dark zip-up jacket. His expression softened into something worse than contempt. Genuine, brotherly concern. "Look, I'm just saying you could aim higher. You should. This settling, it's not a good look. Anyway, I'll see you on the other side. Try to get an aisle seat. More legroom." He clapped me on the shoulder, a patronizing, solid thump, and strode toward the jet bridge, his carry-on a sleek, hard-shell Rimowa that glided silently over the linoleum. A gate agent greeted him by name. He disappeared into the privileged tunnel. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Around me, the economy line was forming, a mosaic of families, students, weary-looking people in comfortable shoes. Normal people, my people, in a way Declan would never understand. I felt a pang, sharp and sudden. I missed the crisp, sterile air of a command center, the weight of a headset, the clarity of a mission. This, the civilian chaos, the petty judgments, was so much harder to navigate. Pulling out my phone, I checked the time, 40 minutes until general boarding. I found a relatively quiet corner, near a window overlooking the tarmac. A United 787 was pushing back, its engines whining to life. My fingers itched for a control column, for the complex simplicity of a cockpit. I'd logged thousands of hours, but the last year had been mostly desks and strategy rooms. This trip home was a rare, negotiated slice of normalcy. Normal. I almost laughed. Nothing about my life was normal. The lie was a second skin, one I wore even with family, especially with family like Declan. Telling him the truth would be complicated. It would involve explanations I wasn't allowed to give, and it would inevitably lead to the same conclusion. He'd find a way to make it about him. My sister, the paper pusher, was a safe. Boring story. My sister, the Air Force combat veteran and tactical commander. That was a story with questions I couldn't answer. I pulled a small, government-issued paperback from my bag, a mindless thriller, the kind of thing a civilian admin assistant might read. The cover was already dog-eared. I stared at the words, not seeing them, listening instead to the rhythm of the airport, the whine of baggage carts, the squawk of a radio on a TSA officer's belt, the distant, tinny melody of a children's show playing on an iPad. A family settled near me. Two young parents looking harried, a little girl in a princess dress clutching a stuffed dolphin. The mother caught my eye and offered a tired smile. I smiled back. See, Declan, I thought, this is real. This is what matters. Not the champagne, but the little seed of irritation he'd planted remained. A tiny, hot ember in my chest. Your limit. He had no idea, no conception. The limits I'd pushed, the edges I'd looked over, they would give him nightmares. The classified limits of endurance, of G-force, of decision-making under fire. The limit where a single, calculated choice meant the difference between a successful mission and a flag-draped coffin. My phone vibrated. A number with a 703 area code. Pentagon. I stood up and walked quickly toward the windows, away from listening ears. Ravenswood. I answered, my voice low. Colonel, it's Major Briggs. The voice on the other end was all business, but I heard the underlying tension. Apologies for the contact. Routine check-in. You're en route to SEA. At JFK, about to board. Status is green. No issues. I used the calm, even tone I reserved for secure comms. The all-normal voice. Understood. Enjoy the birthday cake. We'll hold the fort. A pause. You're sure you don't want us to arrange more comfortable transport? It's within protocol for your clearance level. I glanced back at the growing economy line. Negative. Major. Commercial is fine. Maintaining low profile. I'll be back online in 72 hours. Copy that. Colonel. Safe travels. Briggs out. The call disconnected. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. Low profile. Right. So low, I was about to spend 7 hours sandwiched between a snoring stranger and a crying infant, all while my brother held court in first class, secure in his judgment of my life's limits. The gate agent's voice crackled over the PA. Now boarding Alaska Airlines Flight 87 to Seattle-Tacoma. We'd like to invite our Gold status members and passengers requiring extra assistance. The economy queue shifted, a collective lean forward. I took my place at the end, my carry-on at my feet. The princess dress girl was now whining, and her father was jiggling her on his hip. I felt a strange sense of solidarity with them. We were all just trying to get where we were going, doing our best with what we had. Finally, it was my turn. I handed over my boarding pass. Flimsy thermal paper, already crumpling at the edges. The agent scanned it, her eyes on the screen. Last row, window seat, Ms. Ravenswood, she said with a professional smile. Have a pleasant flight. last row, next to the bathrooms. Declan would have had a field day. Thank you, I said, and walked down the jet bridge. The transition was always jarring. From the vast, echoing space of the terminal to the narrow, tubular world of the aircraft. The flight attendants at the front greeted me, their smiles bright and fixed. I could see into the first-class cabin. Declan was already seated, a glass of orange juice in his hand. He was talking animatedly to the elderly woman in the seat next to him, no doubt explaining something financial. He hadn't seen me. I moved back, past the premium economy seats that were merely slightly less cramped, back into the deep recesses of the plane. The air grew warmer, thicker with the smell of recycled air and disinfectant. I found my seat, 37A, a window. The middle seat was empty. The aisle seat was occupied by a massive man in a football jersey, spilling generously over both armrests. He gave me a tight nod as I stowed my bag under the seat in front of me. Overhead bin was already full of oversized roller bags. I squeezed into my window seat, my knees immediately pressing against the seat back in front. Limit. I took a slow, deliberate breath, the kind I used before a high-stress maneuver. In, hold, out. The plane filled up. A harried-looking woman with an infant in a carrier took the middle seat, offering an apologetic smile. The baby was quiet. For now, the pre-flight safety video began to play on the drop-down screens. I watched the familiar, cartoonish motions: seatbelt, oxygen mask, life vest. My mind, trained for actual emergencies, automatically critiqued the instructions. They don't mention brace positions for non-impact water landings. The mask donning time is optimistic in a rapid decompression scenario. Declan's voice was in my head again. This is your limit. No, I thought, as the engines spooled up with a deep, vibrating roar. This is my choice. This cramped seat, this civilian discomfort, this tedious journey. It's the price of the other life, the one where limits are things you test, break, and redefine, the one he can't see, the one I can't show him. The plane began to taxi, and I looked out the window at the sprawling, grimy landscape of Queens. Somewhere out there, in nondescript office buildings and secure facilities, people like Major Briggs were holding the fort. My world, the real one. For the next 7 hours, I would play my part. Emily Ravenswood, dutiful daughter, disappointing sister, government paper pusher. I would sit in my limit and endure. The aircraft turned onto the runway, the engines rising to a scream. The force of acceleration pushed me back into the thin seat cushion. I closed my eyes. Let's get this over with. The line for security at Terminal 7 was a slow-moving river of humanity, choked with luggage, frustration, and the faint, ever-present smell of anxiety and disinfectant. I fell into step behind Declan, who was already tapping his phone with one hand, his carry-on trailing behind him like a obedient pet. See, this is what you get for not checking a bag, he said without looking up. Now we have to stand in this cattle call with everyone else. First class gets expedited. You know, a dedicated lane. I was through in 3 minutes last time. I said nothing, focusing on the scuffed floor tiles ahead. My standard issue, black duffel, was slung over my shoulder, its contents meticulously packed and organized according to a mental checklist born of 1,000 deployments. Minimal civilian clothes, toiletries in regulation-sized, clear bags, a few personal items, and, of course, the other things, the things that lived in the hidden compartment, the things that were about to become a very big problem. I mean, what do you even have in there? He glanced at my bag, his nose wrinkling slightly. It's a weekend trip. I have a garment bag just for my suits. You look like you're headed to the gym. I pack light, I said, my voice flat. You pack cheap, he corrected, a smirk in his voice. He finally looked at me. It's okay, Emily. Not everyone is meant for the finer things. Some of us are just economy people in mindset. You know. The line shuffled forward a few feet. A TSA agent with the weary demeanor of a war-hardened veteran bellowed. Liquids, laptops, tablets, large electronics, out of your bags. Have your IDs and boarding passes ready. The mantra was repeated down the line, a call and response of modern travel. Declan sighed, a theatrical sound, and the performance art begins. Take off your shoes, your belt, your dignity, all for the privilege of being irradiated and fondled. Honestly, sometimes I think it's just security theater, a jobs program for the unemployable. Declan, not here, I muttered, catching the eye of the TSA agent who had just spoken. The man's gaze was flinty, bored. He'd heard it all before. What? It's true. Look at them. He gestured vaguely with his phone. They're just going through the motions. It's all for show. The real threats aren't stopped by taking our shampoo bottles. My jaw tightened. The real threats. He had no idea. The real threats were stopped by people like me, in places he'd never see, using methods he couldn't imagine. The real threats were stopped by intelligence, by vigilance, by the unglamorous, grinding work that happened far from the public eye. This security theater was the visible, reassuring tip of a vast, iceberg-like apparatus, and he was mocking it. Just get your ID out, I said, pulling my own driver's license and the flimsy boarding pass from my jacket pocket. My government ID, the real one, the one that mattered, was secured in its usual place. I had a moment of internal debate. Should I use it? The line for pre-check was shorter, and my clearance technically granted me access, but using it meant questions, a different screening lane, potential flags, low profile. I reminded myself the whole point was to be Emily Ravenswood, forgettable, civilian. I'd flown commercial under this identity a dozen times without issue. Low profile, right, next to Declan in his Brioni suit, loudly opining on monetary policy to anyone within earshot. Invisible was not an option. We finally reached the ID checkpoint. A young TSA officer with a severe bun and tired eyes took Declan's license and boarding pass. She scanned them, glanced at his face, nodded. Have a good flight, sir. Declan gave her a dazzling, insincere smile. Thank you. Keep up the good work. He said it like he was bestowing a knighthood. Then it was my turn. I handed over my Washington State driver's license and the crumpled Alaska Airlines pass. The officer looked at the license, then at me. Her eyes lingered a fraction of a second too long. A tiny flicker of something. Recognition? No, that was impossible. Assessment? Maybe. Her gaze dropped to my bag, then back to my face. Purpose of your travel? She asked, her voice neutral. Visiting family. My mother's birthday. The standard answer. She nodded, handed the documents back. Have a good flight. But her eyes followed me as I moved to the bins. See, even they know. Declan whispered, leaning close as we piled our belongings into the gray plastic tubs. You look suspiciously normal, like you're trying too hard to blend in. He placed his shoes, belt, watch, and laptop neatly in a bin, a picture of organized compliance. I dumped my bag, shoes, and jacket into another. Just move, Declan. We fed our bins onto the conveyor belt. Declan went through the millimeter wave scanner first, striking a pose as instructed. He was waved through with a bored nod from the attendant. My turn. I stepped in, raised my hands, felt the brief, silent sweep of the machine. I expected the all clear. The display on the operator's screen lit up with a yellow highlight around my torso. Stepped to the side. Ma'am, the operator said. A middle-aged woman with a name tag that read Gina. Her voice was polite but firm. No room for argument. Declan, waiting on the other side, already collecting his things, froze. A slow, incredulous smile spread across his face. Here we go, it said. I stepped out of the scanner. A female TSA officer, younger, with sharp eyes, approached. I need to perform a pat-down. Ma'am, standard procedure. You're showing an anomaly around your midsection. Do you consent? I could feel the heat creeping up my neck, not from embarrassment, but from a sudden, intense awareness of the situation, spiraling, low profile. So much for that. I consent, I said, my voice calm. I knew the drill. I'd been on the other side of it, in a different context. Arms out to the sides. Please, feet apart. The officer began, her hands gloved. Professional, thorough. She ran the backs of her hands along my sides, under my arms, down my legs. Declan was watching, his smirk now fully formed. He'd paused in putting on his expensive loafers, enjoying the show, traveling light, but not that light. Huh, he said, just loud enough for me and the TSA officer to hear. That way you got, Ames, a money belt full of coupons. I ignored him, staring straight ahead at the blur of passengers moving through the other lanes. The officer finished the pat down. All clear here. Gina, she called to the scanner operator, but Gina was frowning at her screen. Bag check. The carry-on. There's a density in the lining. Back right quadrant. My stomach dropped. The lining. The special lining. The officer nodded. Ma'am, I need to inspect your bag. Please come with me. I followed her to the inspection table. A cold, stainless steel surface. Declan, now fully dressed, sauntered over, dragging his Rimowa behind him. Trouble in paradise, he murmured. What did you pack? A brick of government cheese? Seriously, Emily, if you needed money, sir, you need to wait over there, the officer said, pointing to a line of chairs against the wall. She's my sister. I'm just making sure she's okay. His tone was dripping with false concern. Wait, over there. The officer's voice left no room for debate. For a second, Declan's smug facade cracked, replaced by irritation. He retreated a few steps, but didn't sit. He planted himself like a spectator, arms crossed. The officer, whose name tag read R. Vasquez, took my duffel. Is this your bag? Yes. Did you pack it yourself? Yes. Has it been in your possession at all times? Yes. Are you aware of the rules regarding prohibited items in carry-on luggage? Yes, officer. She began to unpack with efficient movements. My jeans, my sweaters, my toiletries bag. She examined the clear bag of liquids, squeezing the tubes of toothpaste and moisturizer. Everything was normal. Civilian, bland. She felt along the seams of the bag, her fingers probing. They stopped at the back, right where Gina had indicated. There's something sewn into the lining here. It wasn't a question. It's a reinforced panel. For structure, I offered. The lie weak even to my own ears. Officer Vasquez wasn't buying it. She pulled a small, hooked blade from her belt. I'm going to have to open it, ma'am. My mind raced. This was it. The charade was over. I had a choice. Let her cut and have everything spill out in the middle of JFK with Declan as an audience, or I could try to control the situation. Low profile was a smoking crater. Now it was about damage control. Officer, I said, lowering my voice, stepping slightly closer. Before you do that, I need you to call your supervisor, and I need you to do it quietly. She paused, the blade hovering over the black canvas. Her eyes met mine, searching. I held her gaze, letting the practiced, unwavering calm of command seep into my own. It was a look that had quieted briefing rooms and steadied rookie pilots. It was not the look of a flustered civilian caught with contraband. Ma'am, I am authorized to inspect. I understand, and you're doing your job. Please call your supervisor. Now, use your radio. Tell him you have a priority foxtrot at checkpoint 7B. The code was old, from a joint agency training years ago, but it might still be in some TSA playbook. It was a Hail Mary. Confusion, then dawning suspicion, flashed in her eyes. A what? Priority foxtrot. Tell him, please. I put every ounce of quiet authority I possessed into the request. It was the voice I used when a system was failing at 30,000 feet. It was not a voice that brooked argument. She hesitated, her eyes flicking from my face to the suspicious bulge in the bag, to Declan, who was now leaning forward, trying to catch our conversation. The theater of it was too strange, too specific. Slowly, she lowered the blade and raised the radio clipped to her shoulder. Control. This is Vasquez at 7B. I need a supervisor to my location. We have a possible priority foxtrot. Over. The radio crackled. Static. Then a male voice, tinny and annoyed. Say again. Vasquez? Did you say foxtrot? Affirmative. Priority foxtrot. At the inspection table. There was a longer pause. I could imagine the controller flipping through a mental or physical manual, trying to place the term. I held my breath. Stand by. The radio went silent. Declan couldn't stand it anymore. He took a few steps forward. Is there a problem, officer? Look, my sister works for the government, Department of Defense. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. Some office supplies or something. He was trying to sound helpful, but it came out as condescending. An attempt to manage the situation, his situation. The embarrassment of a sibling causing a scene. Officer Vasquez ignored him. Her eyes locked on me. The seconds stretched. Passengers streamed past, throwing curious glances at the inspection station, at the serious-looking officer and the woman in simple clothes standing ramrod straight. I could see Declan's mind working, constructing a narrative. Emily, the bumbling bureaucrat, accidentally packed classified stationery. How typical, how utterly, embarrassingly her. Then, movement. A man in a white shirt and tie, a TSA supervisor badge on his lanyard, was striding quickly from the office area. He was in his 50s, with a military bearing and a no-nonsense expression. His name tag read J. Miller. His eyes scanned the checkpoint, landing on us. He didn't walk, he marched. He reached the table. Officer Vasquez, report. Sir, this passenger's bag showed an anomalous density in the lining. During inspection, she requested I call you and used the term priority foxtrot. Supervisor Miller's gaze snapped to me. It was assessing, penetrating look. It took in my posture, my expression, the way I held myself. It completely disregarded my clothes, my brother, the mundane chaos of the security line. This was a man who had seen things. Ma'am, he said, his voice low. Explain. I kept my voice calm, level, just above a whisper. Supervisor Miller, my name is Emily Ravenswood. Inside the lining of that bag, you will find identification and materials that are not for public display. I am traveling on personal leave. I need you to secure the area and contact the AFLO at this airport immediately. The acronym AFLO, Air Force Liaison Officer, hit its mark. His eyes widened just a fraction. The priority foxtrot might have been obscure, but AFLO was current, specific, and spoke directly to a chain of command he would recognize. What the hell is an AFFLO? Declan interjected, his patience gone. Officer, this is ridiculous. She's a clerical worker. Emily, just let them cut the bag open so we can go. Whatever junk you have in there, we'll sort it out. I'll pay the fine. He reached for his wallet, the ultimate solver of problems. Sir, step back. Supervisor Miller's voice was a whip crack. It wasn't loud, but it carried a tone of absolute authority that made even Declan flinch. Miller's hand came up, not threateningly, but definitively, halting Declan in his tracks. He never took his eyes off me. Your ID, Miller said to me, the one in the lining. Can you describe it? It's in a black leather folio, silver eagle and shield on the front. My photo and rank are inside. I kept the description simple, factual. He gave a sharp nod. He believed me. The details were too precise, the demeanor too controlled for a fantasist or a smuggler. He keyed his own radio. Control, Miller at 7B. I need a level 2 containment at my location. No, not a drill. Secure the immediate screening area. Redirect the lines. And get me the number for the Air Force Liaison Office. Now. The radio erupted with confused questions, but Miller's voice cut through. Now, people. Suddenly, the energy around us changed. Other TSA officers, sensing the shift, began to calmly but firmly steer passengers away from our lane, opening up a bubble of empty space around the inspection table. A portable screen was wheeled out, positioning itself to block the view from the growing crowd. Declan was herded back behind the screen, his mouth agape, all his bluster evaporated, replaced by pure, unadulterated confusion. What is going on? He demanded, his voice rising. Emily, what did you do? I didn't answer. I watched Miller. He took the hooked blade from a stunned Officer Vasquez. With careful, precise movements, he slit the stitching on the inner lining of my duffel. He reached in, his fingers closing around the folio. He pulled it out. It was unremarkable looking, a simple, worn black leather bifold. He opened it. His eyes scanned the contents. I saw his throat move as he swallowed. His posture stiffened, then corrected into something even straighter. He looked from the ID to my face, then back to the ID. The color seemed to drain from his face, then flood back. Slowly, deliberately, he closed the folio. He looked at Officer Vasquez, then at the other officers who had gathered. Unsure of what was happening, "Ma'am," he said, his voice now carrying a new, profound respect. "Colonel Ravenswood, my apologies for the inconvenience." The word hung in the suddenly quiet air. "Colonel," behind the screen. Declan made a sound like a punctured tire. "See, Colonel." Supervisor Miller ignored him. Officer Vasquez, secure the colonel's belongings. Repack the bag. Carefully. He turned back to me. Colonel, if you'll come with me, please. The AFLO is on his way. We have a private holding area. My brother, I said, gesturing with my chin towards where Declan stood. Pale and shell-shocked, Miller's eyes flicked to Declan, taking in the expensive suit, the look of utter, world-shattering bewilderment. He seemed to process the relationship, the dissonance. He gave a short, sharp nod. He can accompany you, but he remains with an officer. For security. I nodded. Understood. Miller gestured for me to follow him, leading the way past the screen, through a nondescript door marked Authorized Personnel Only. I glanced back at Declan. Officer Vasquez had retrieved his grimoire and was gently, but firmly, guiding him by the elbow. He moved like a sleepwalker, his eyes huge, fixed on me, on the black folio now held respectfully in Supervisor Miller's hand. As the door swung shut behind us, blocking out the noise and stares of the terminal, I heard Declan's voice, small and shattered, whisper one last time to the universe. Colonel! The door clicked shut behind us, muting the terminal's cacophony to a dull, distant roar. We were in a sterile, fluorescent-lit corridor that smelled of industrial cleaner and stale coffee. Supervisor Miller walked a pace ahead, his posture rigid with a new kind of attention. Officer Vasquez followed behind me, carrying my repacked duffel as if it contained delicate explosives. Declan was shepherded by another, larger, TSA officer, his face a mask of stunned silence. Miller led us to an unmarked door, swiped a keycard, and held it open. In here, Colonel. The room was a standard airport security office. Linoleum floors, a scuffed conference table surrounded by mismatched chairs, filing cabinets, a wall of monitors, showing grainy black and white feeds of various checkpoints. But the normalcy ended there. Standing in the center of the room were two men. They weren't TSA. They wore the crisp, dark blue trousers and light blue shirts of the United States Air Force, their shoulders bearing the distinct insignia of the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. Their posture was coiled spring alert, their eyes scanning the room, taking in every detail before landing on me. They were young, maybe late 20s, but their bearing added a decade of gravity. The Taller one, a square-jawed captain with a razor-sharp crease in his trousers, took a half step forward. His eyes flicked to Supervisor Miller, then to the black folio in Miller's hand, and finally to me. There was a microsecond of assessment, a verification against a mental file. Then he snapped to attention. His companion did the same, the movement synchronized and sharp. Colonel Ravenswood, the captain said, his voice a baritone that seemed to vibrate in the small room. He delivered a perfect, cracking salute. Captain Jameson, Afosi, JFK Detachment. This is Technical Sergeant Mulhern. We were notified of your status by the liaison office. Sir, the command center is standing by for your contact. The word sir hung in the air. In the Air Force, it was a gender-neutral term of respect for a superior officer. In this room, to Declan's ears, it must have sounded like a clap of thunder. I returned the salute, my own motion automatic, an ingrained piece of muscle memory that felt more natural than breathing. At ease, Captain, thank you for the quick response. I kept my voice even, the command tone I used on the floor of the ops center. It was a voice that expected to be obeyed. Declan made a small, choked sound behind me. I didn't turn. I could feel his stare burning a hole in the back of my head. Supervisor Miller, looking profoundly out of his depth, but determined to be correct, carefully placed the black folio on the conference table. Colonel, your identification. We had no idea. The system didn't flag you for expedited screening. There must have been a glitch with the manifest. There's no glitch, Supervisor, I said, picking up the folio. It felt familiar and heavy in my hand. I was traveling on a civilian ticket, under a low-profile travel protocol. The anomaly was with my bag, not the database. You and your officer followed procedure correctly. I nodded to Officer Vasquez, who was standing stiffly by the door, her eyes wide. Your vigilance is noted and appreciated. Vasquez managed a jerky nod. Thank you, ma'am. Colonel, sir, I opened the folio. Inside, shielded by a clear plastic sleeve, was my common access card, but it wasn't the standard green one. It was a stark white with bold red bands across the top and bottom, a special access credential. Next to it was my Air Force ID card, my official photo, my name, and in bold, clear type, Ravenswood, Emily J., and below that, rank, Colonel, U.S. Air Force. The line for clearance read, TS/SCI/PRD/DCID. Alphabet soup that spelled out a world of secrets. I slid the ID from its sleeve and handed it to Captain Jameson. Verification. Captain. He took it, studied it for only a second, and handed it back. Verified. Colonel. His demeanor left no room for doubt. This was a formality, a protocol. He already knew who I was. Now, I said, slipping the ID back into the folio. The situation report. What's the comm setup here? Jameson gestured to a secure landline phone on the desk. Secure line to the AFLO office, which can patch you through to anywhere. We also have a portable, encrypted satellite unit in the vehicle if you need to go mobile. General Walsh's office is holding. Priority 1. He's awaiting your sitrep before initiating bandsaw. Bandsaw, the code name, sent a jolt of cold adrenaline through my system. It was a contingency protocol, one of a handful I was briefed on. It meant a rapid, unscheduled deployment to a hot zone. My personal leave was officially over. I moved to the phone. Give me the line to General Walsh. Clear the room of non-essential personnel. Please. Captain Jameson turned to the TSA staff. Gentlemen, ma'am, we need the room. Supervisor Miller nodded rapidly, ushering a still-stunned Officer Vasquez and the other officer out. He paused at the door, looking at Declan, who was rooted to the spot, his face ashen. The civilian, sir. Jameson looked at me, a question in his eyes. I glanced at Declan. His mouth was slightly open. His eyes were darting from my face to the Air Force IDs, to the serious expressions of the OSI agents. The man who had lectured me on statements and limits 20 minutes ago now looked like he'd been hit by one of the planes outside. He was completely, utterly unraveled. He stays, I said. He's family, but he remains silent and in that chair. I pointed to a chair in the corner, far from the phone and the desk. Captain, ensure he understands the consequences of interrupting or repeating anything he hears. The Espionage Act covers more than just government employees. Jameson gave a short, sharp nod. He walked over to Declan, not threateningly, but with an absolute, physical authority that made Declan flinch. Sir, you will sit there. You will not speak. You will not use your phone. You will not move. What you are about to hear is classified at the highest levels. Any breach of that classified information, intentional or not, will result in federal prosecution. Do you understand? Declan blinked, his head moving in a vague, wobbly motion that might have been a nod. Jameson guided him firmly by the elbow to the chair. Declan sank into it, his expensive suit crumpling. He looked small. Jameson returned to stand by the door. A silent sentinel, Sergeant Mulhern, took up a post by the window, his back to the room, watching the tarmac. I picked up the secure phone. It was already connected, a steady green light glowing. This is Ravenswood. Authenticate Delta Zulu 904. A voice, crisp and familiar, came on the line. Authentication confirmed. Storm, welcome back to the war. It was General Walsh. His use of my old call sign from my flying days was a deliberate anchor to reality. A touchstone. Sorry to yank you off the bench, but the team's in trouble. Understood, sir. Give me the play-by-play. I pulled a small notebook and a pen from my folio. The civilian, Emily, was gone. Colonel Ravenswood was at the desk. Exercise Steel Viper has gone live. Not the exercise, the real deal. We're seeing a coordinated, multi-vector attack on the Blue Force Tactical Network. ECM, cyber, the works. It's a mirror of the Crimson Sands playbook, but with new wrinkles. Sophisticated. They've spoofed GPS for an entire carrier group in the Med, jammed comms for 2 squadrons, and are currently running a 0-day exploit on the Joint Battle Management System. Blue Force Command is blind, deaf, and dumb. General Connolly was en route to Ramstein to take tactical command, but his bird had to divert to Iceland with mechanical issues. He's grounded for at least 12 hours. I was already scribbling notes. Crimson Sands. It was a Chinese-Russian hybrid warfare doctrine we'd been wargaming against for years. A test of our new networked systems. For it to be happening now, during an exercise, was either the worst coincidence in history or a deliberate, hostile probing action. Assessment: is this a drill gone wrong or a deliberate probe? Too clean to be an accident, Walsh said, his voice grim. The pattern matches Crimson Sands Scenario 7 Alpha too closely. This is a live-fire test. They're using the exercise Chaos as cover. We need you at Ramstein, in the hot seat. Yesterday, you're the only one on the chessboard who's written the counterplay to 7 Alpha. Connolly signed off on it, but you wrote it. I closed my eyes for a second. The counter Crimson Sands Scenario 7A playbook, a year of wargaming, simulation, and red team exercises distilled into a brutal, elegant set of protocols. It lived in a safe in my head and in a classified server somewhere in Nebraska. The playbook requires system-level authorization. Do I have it? You have full tactical authority. The SEC Def just signed the execute order. This is now Operation Iron Shroud. You are Task Force Commander. Your bird is spinning up at the guard hangar. An F-15C Eagle driver, call sign Rook, will be waiting. Your usual ride. An F-15, not a commercial jet, not even a military transport. A fighter. They were pulling out all the stops. Understood. ETA to Ramstein. Rook promises 6 hours, including a tanker hop over the Atlantic. He's got a need for speed. We'll have a secure data link patched to you in the air. You can start running diagnostics and prepping the countermeasures. Your team at Ramstein is already spinning up, but they need the conductor. Storm, the orchestra is waiting. I'm on my way, sir. Ravenswood out. I hung up the phone. The room was silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the fluorescent lights and Declan's shallow, rapid breathing from the corner. I turned to Captain Jameson. Captain, I need transport to the New York Air National Guard hangar immediately. I also have a personal situation. I glanced at Declan. My brother was scheduled to travel with me to Seattle. That is no longer possible. I need him secured and transported. Options. Jameson didn't hesitate. We can have him escorted to a secure holding lounge. Colonel, he can remain there under our supervision until you determine further instructions. Or, if you authorize, he can accompany you to the hangar. He would remain in a secure, isolated area, but he would be adjacent. I looked at Declan. He was staring at me as if I'd grown a second head. The words he'd overheard. 0-day exploit, carrier group, tactical authority, F-15, were bouncing around in his brain, finding no purchase. His world of stock tickers and merger deals had just been vaporized by the lexicon of modern warfare. A company, I said, making a snap decision. Let him see. Let him understand a fraction of it. He comes to the hangar. He remains under your direct supervision. Captain, he sees nothing, hears nothing, touches nothing. Is that clear? Crystal. Colonel. Jameson turned to Sergeant Mulhern. Sergeant, bring the vehicle around to Bay 3. No sirens, but expedite. Colonel, if you'd like to change. He gestured subtly to my civilian clothes. I nodded. From the duffel, which Vasquez had placed reverently on the table, I extracted a simple, neatly folded bundle. A sand-colored, short-sleeved Air Force combat shirt. The Velcro patches on the shoulders were blank, but the left breast bore a woven tape that read Ravenswood. There were no ribbons, no unit patches. It was a sterile, operational shirt. I shrugged off my civilian jacket and pulled the combat shirt on over my t-shirt. The fabric was tough, familiar. I fastened the top button. Then, from a small zippered pouch inside the folio, I took out 2 rank insignias, the silver eagles of a colonel. I affixed them to the Velcro patches on my shoulders. The final touch. The transformation was complete. When I turned around, Declan was crying, not sobbing, but silent tears were tracking down his cheeks, cutting through the carefully maintained facade of the Manhattan financier. He wasn't looking at the eagles on my shoulders. He was looking at my face, seeing it, perhaps for the first time, seeing the lines of stress and command that no admin job could possibly impart, seeing the calm, lethal focus in my eyes that had just been discussing the spoofing of a carrier group's GPS as if it were a troublesome Spreadsheet error. His voice was a broken whisper. Emily, who are you? I walked over to him, stopping a few feet away. Captain Jameson watched, a silent guardian. I'm your sister, Declan, I said, my voice softer now, but no less firm. And I'm an officer in the United States Air Force. The desk job, it was a cover, a story to keep things simple, to keep you and Mom and everyone else safe from worrying and safe from this. I gestured vaguely, encompassing the room. The OSI agents, the invisible crisis unfolding across an ocean. A colonel, he breathed. You're a colonel? Like in the movies. Not like in the movies, I said, like in the real world, where the decisions aren't about profit margins, but about lives and national security, where the limit isn't a first-class seat, but the edge of a war zone. He flinched as if struck. The word limit hung between us, toxic and pathetic now. Captain Jameson's radio crackled. Vehicles in position. Sir, time to go. Colonel, Jameson said. I gave a final look at my brother, a man reduced to a confused, tearful child in a $5000 suit. You can sit here in the dark, Declan, with your assumptions, or you can come with me. Keep your mouth shut, and maybe begin to understand. Your choice, but you have 5 seconds to decide. He stared at me, his mind visibly reeling, trying to reconcile the image of the little sister he'd patronized for a decade with the figure standing before him in a combat shirt with silver eagles on her shoulders, giving orders to a captain who snapped to attention. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, a clumsy, childish gesture. He took a deep, shuddering breath. Then, slowly, he pushed himself up from the chair. He didn't stand straight. He was hunched, as if carrying a tremendous weight. I'll come, he whispered. Then follow Sergeant Mulhern. Don't speak. Don't ask questions. Just move. Sergeant Mulhern opened the door. Declan, with one last, bewildered look at me, shuffled out after him. I turned to Captain Jameson. All business. Once more. Let's move. Captain, I have a war game to turn into a victory. Yes, sir, he said, and opened the door for me. As I walked out of the security office, back into the bright, noisy terminal, everything was different. People didn't see a woman in jeans and a combat shirt. They saw the uniform. They saw the rank. They saw Captain Jameson, a step behind and to my left, his eyes scanning the crowd, his posture screaming official business. A path cleared before us. Whispers followed. What's going on? Is that the military? We moved against the flow of passengers, a small island of urgency in a sea of leisurely travel. Declan trailed behind Mulhern, his head down, his Rimowa rolling behind him, now looking absurd and out of place. We bypassed the terminal exits entirely. Mulhern led us to an unmarked, heavy door. He swiped a card, and we entered a concrete service corridor, stark and echoing with our footsteps. At the end was a set of double doors. Mulhern pushed them open. Bright afternoon, sunlight flooded in. Parked on the tarmac, its engine idling with a low, powerful rumble, was a blacked-out Chevrolet Suburban with government plates. The back door was open, but it wasn't the Suburban that made Declan stop dead in his tracks. It was what was parked behind it, on the other side of a chain-link fence, on a separate apron belonging to the Air National Guard, a sleek, gray F-15C Eagle fighter jet. Its canopy open, was being swarmed by crew chiefs. A pilot in a green flight suit and helmet was climbing the ladder, giving a thumbs up, even from a distance. The raw, predatory power of the machine was palpable. The name on the side of the cockpit, just visible. Reed, Rook. Declan's head swiveled from the jet to me, his eyes wide with a new, even more profound terror. Emily, he gasped, the word barely audible over the jet's whine. You're not getting on that, are you? I didn't answer. I just looked at the eagle, a fierce, familiar longing surging in my chest. My ride was here. Captain Jameson gestured to the Suburban. For you, sir, the eagle is for your baggage. He meant the duffel bag containing my gear, and the folio with the codes and plans that might just save the exercise or prevent a real war. I nodded, sliding into the back seat of the Suburban. Jameson got in the front passenger seat. Declan was practically shoved in beside me by Sergeant Mulhern, who then took the wheel as the Suburban pulled away, heading for the guard hangar. Declan finally found his voice. A hoarse, broken thing. You fly fighter jets. I looked out the window at the shrinking figure of the F-15. I used to, I said quietly. Now, I mostly tell them where to go. The car accelerated, leaving the world of commercial aviation and my brother's old understanding of me far behind. The New York Air National Guard hangar was a cavernous space of echoing concrete, buzzing machinery, and the sharp, clean smell of jet fuel and hydraulic fluid. It was a world away from the soft carpets and hushed tones of the commercial terminal. The black Suburban drove straight in through a massive open door, rolling to a stop beside a cluster of vehicles that included a Humvee and a sleek, unmarked sedan. My door was opened by a young airman who snapped a salute so crisp I could hear the swish of his sleeve. Colonel Ravenswood. General Walsh is on the secure line in the briefing room. Ma'am. I returned the salute. Lead the way, airman. I slung my duffel over my shoulder. Declan stumbled out of the other side of the Suburban, his eyes wide, trying to take in the scene. F-16s in angular gray paint schemes were parked in neat rows, their canopies gleaming under the harsh lights. Crew chiefs in coveralls moved with purposeful efficiency. A low, distant roar signified an engine test somewhere deeper in the complex. It was organized, purposeful chaos. A symphony I knew every note of. To Declan, it must have looked like an alien planet. Captain Jameson fell into step beside me. The F-15 is pre-flighted and ready. Colonel, Rook is waiting for your go. Your gear will be stowed in the external pod. The Gulfstream is being prepped for your guest. He gestured slightly with his head towards Declan, who was trailing behind Sergeant Mulhern like a lost tourist. Understood. Let's get to the briefing. We walked past the fighter line. I saw my Eagle, the F-15C, call sign Rook stenciled boldly below the cockpit. It was loaded, the missile rails under its wings empty for this very mission. But the 20mm cannon port was visible. A familiar, fierce pride swelled in my chest. Old friend, I thought. We're not done yet. We entered a side door and moved down a sterile corridor lined with motivational posters and safety notices. The airman stopped at a door marked Briefing RM. 3. Secure. He keyed a code. The lock clicked, and he held it open. The room was small, dominated by a large monitor on one wall and a conference table with a bank of secure telephones. A man in a flight suit, helmet tucked under his arm, stood by the window. He turned as we entered. It was Major Chris Rookdern. His face broke into a familiar, wolfish grin. Storm, he said, his voice a gravelly baritone. Heard you were slumming it in the civilian sector. Had to send a proper chariot to fetch you. Rook, still making noise and burning gas. I see. You see, my bay down. The casual banter was a ritual, a touch of normalcy before the storm. Only the best for our Cinderella. Your carriage awaits. We're fueled, filed, and frisky. Tanker rendezvous is set for 0300 Zulu over the pond. We'll have you in Ramstein before the local breakfast special goes cold. His eyes flicked past me to Declan, who hovered near the doorway, looking utterly out of place in his suit. And this is my brother, Declan. He's along for the ride. Civilian observer status, under Captain Jameson's supervision. My tone made it clear that was the extent of the explanation Rook would get. Rook's eyebrows went up a fraction, but he just gave a short nod. Civilian. He said the word as if it were a mildly interesting species of insect. He's on the GV. We're not running a buddy program on the Eagle. I'm aware. Let's get the sitrep. I moved to the head of the table. Rook tapped a key on a laptop, and the large monitor flickered to life. It showed a map of Europe and the Mediterranean, overlaid with a bewildering array of icons, lines, and symbols. To the untrained eye, it was abstract art. To me, it was a screaming headline. Operation Steel Viper. Rook began, his joking manner gone, replaced by a clipped, professional delivery. He picked up a laser pointer. As of 2100 Zulu, what was supposed to be a Tier 1 NATO command post exercise transformed into a live-fire test bed for a hybrid warfare package. We're designating Crimson Sandstorm. Attack vectors are threefold. He clicked. The map zoomed in on the eastern Mediterranean. Vector 1. Electronic combat, a coordinated barrage of GPS jamming and spoofing targeting the USS Harry S. Truman Carrier Strike Group. Their navigation is currently reading them as 50 nautical miles off their true position. Commercial shipping in the area is also affected. The jamming signature matches Russian Kibani systems. But the spoofing tech is new. It's creating false AIS and military transponder signals. The battle group is effectively blind and broadcasting ghost images of itself. Declan made a small noise. I glanced over. He was staring at the screen, his face pale. "Spoofing a carrier," he whispered, mostly to himself. No one acknowledged him. Vector 2. Cyber penetration. Rook clicked again. The view changed to a complex 3D network diagram that looked like a neon spiderweb. A zero-day exploit targeting the NATO Allied Data Service Platform, the ADSB. That's the core nervous system for the exercise, handling everything from logistics to real-time drone feeds. The exploit is acting as a worm, replicating and corrupting data packets. Blue Force air defense picture is degrading at a rate of 12% per hour. Red Force, the simulated aggressors, are seeing none of this. From their chairs, the exercise is proceeding normally. They think we're just playing badly. Command response so far? I asked, my eyes tracking the creeping red infection on the network map. Panicked. Rook said bluntly. General Connolly was supposed to be on site at Ramstein to assume command and implement the Counter-Crimson Sands playbook. His C-17 had a catastrophic hydraulic failure. He's stuck in Keflavik, Iceland. The deputy commander, General Shore, is a logistics genius, but he's not a tactical warfighter. He's trying to manage the crisis by the book. But the book for this hasn't been written. Except, he looked at me, by you. Vector 3. I prompted. Vector 3. Kinetic deception. The map shifted to show the airspace over Poland. Red Force exercise aircraft, their simulated enemy bombers and fighters, are deviating from the approved exercise corridors. They're probing actual NATO air defense response times and patterns. They're using the electronic and cyber fog as cover. It's a layered attack. Colonel, they're testing our seams, and we're fraying. I leaned forward, my hands on the cool table. The puzzle pieces were snapping into place. This wasn't just a test. It was a full-spectrum diagnostic of NATO's readiness, conducted under the plausible deniability of a pre-scheduled exercise. A live, hostile audit. Where's the command paralysis? I asked. Rook zoomed the map to Ramstein Air Base in Germany. Here, the Joint Air Operations Center. The system degradation is causing data latency and conflicting reports. They're arguing over what's real and what's spoofed. The German and French commanders are advocating for a full PSCANNER, halting the exercise entirely. The Americans and Brits want to fight through it, treat it as a real-world aggression to see how the system holds. Meanwhile, the Red Forces, who we now assess are being fed real-time data on our confusion, are getting bolder. An hour ago, 2 simulated Su-35s crossed into a corridor that would, in a real scenario, be a trigger for defensive engagement. Our guys held fire because it's an exercise. The Reds are weaponizing the rules of play. A cold anger settled in my gut. They were using our own procedures, our own caution, against us. It was brilliant, and it was an act of profound hostility. They're not simulating anymore, I said quietly. They're conducting a real-world attack on our command and control, using the exercise as a shield. The kinetic deception is a feint. The real target is our confidence in our own network. That's General Walsh's assessment, a new voice said, coming from the speakerphone in the center of the table. It was Walsh, and the SECDEF agrees, which is why you're now holding the bag. Storm, Connolly is grounded. Shore is overwhelmed. You wrote the playbook for Crimson Sands Scenario 7 Alpha. Can you execute it? I stared at the map, at the spreading red infection. My mind was already racing through the protocols. The Counter-Crimson Sands playbook wasn't a set of orders. It was a philosophy, a ruthless, elegant set of maneuvers designed to turn an adversary's complex, layered attack against them. It required abandoning certain assumptions, making brutal triage decisions about which systems to trust, and launching a series of pre-planned, disruptive counterstrokes that would look like chaos to an outside observer, but would, in theory, re-establish a stable, if degraded, battle space. I I said the words absolute, but I need two things. First, I need full, unilateral tactical authority for the duration of Iron Shroud. No committee votes. I give the orders. The Joint Task Force executes. Second, I need the Black Swan package activated and uplinked to my bird. I'll start the preliminary work en route. There was a pause on the line. Black Swan was the code name for a suite of cutting-edge and highly classified electronic warfare and cyber countermeasure tools. They were the scalpels to the playbook's surgical plan. Their use required presidential-level authorization in a real-world scenario. We were in a gray zone. The authority is yours as of 10 minutes ago. Walsh said, SEC Def, signed the X-Sword. You are Task Force Commander Iron Shroud. Black Swan, that's a heavier lift. I'll wake up the president. Give me 30 minutes. He'll approve. He has to. Make it 20, sir. Every minute we spend talking, the infection spreads. I need Black Swan online before I cross the Irish coast. You'll have it, Rook. You get her there. Storm. The hot seat in Ramstein is waiting. It's a 3-ring circus, and the clowns are in charge. Go be the ringmaster. Yes, sir. The line went dead. The room was silent for a moment, save for the hum of the computers. Rook let out a low whistle. Black Swan. We're pulling out the fancy knives. We're cutting out a cancer. I corrected, my eyes still on the map. I turned to Captain Jameson. Captain, get my brother situated on the Gulf Stream. He is to have no access to comms, no windows for takeoff and landing, and he is not to speak to the crew except for basic needs. Understood. Understood, Colonel. Jameson gestured to Declan. Sir, with me. Declan hadn't moved. He was still staring at the screen, at the pulsating red icons over the Mediterranean. The abstract horror of it had finally broken through his shell of shock. They're attacking us, he said, his voice hollow. During a game? It's not a game, Declan, I said, not unkindly, but with the firmness of a teacher stating a fundamental fact. It's a battlefield, and the rules just changed. Go with the captain. Do exactly as he says. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw not confusion or derision, but a dawning, terrible understanding. The petty calculus of his world, mergers, quarterly reports, first-class upgrades, was irrelevant here. Here, the stakes were the integrity of nations, the stability of alliances, the prevention of a shooting war. His limit was a line on a graph. My limit was a line in the sand, drawn with satellites, fighter jets, and lines of code. He nodded, a stiff, mechanical motion, and followed Jameson out of the room. Rook looked at me. You sure about bringing him? This isn't exactly a sightseeing tour. No, I said, gathering my things. But he needs to see. He needs to understand what I do, what we do. Maybe then he'll stop measuring the world by the thread count of his airline pillow. Rook grinned. Ouch. Family drama. USAF style. Your ride's ready when you are. Colonel, I've already loaded your pre-flight checks. It's a straight shot. Tanker top up over the Atlantic. Then feet dry over Cornwall. We'll be screaming in at Mach 1. 8 most of the way. Try to get some sleep. You'll need it. Sleep is for the dead. Rook, let's go to work. The walk to the flight line was a blur of salutes and focused activity. I was handed a helmet bag and a G-suit by a crew chief. I stepped into a ready room to change, swapping my combat shirt for a cooled, fire-resistant flight suit, pulling on the G-suit, lacing up my boots. The ritual was grounding. Each piece of gear was a layer of the warrior, shedding the skin of Emily Ravenswood, civilian, sister, daughter. When I emerged, suited up, helmet bag in hand, I saw Declan one more time. He was being escorted by Jameson towards a sleek, unmarked Gulfstream G550, parked 100 yards from my Eagle. It was painted a matte gray, with no windows in the passenger cabin, only small portholes near the front. A military spec quiet bird for moving sensitive cargo or confused civilians. He saw me, a figure in a green flight suit, looking like something from a movie. He stopped. Our eyes met across the tarmac. He didn't wave. He just stared. I gave him a single, slow nod. Then I turned my back and walked towards the F-15. The crew chief gave me a thumbs up. The ladder was against the cockpit. I climbed up, sliding into the familiar, snug confines of the ejection seat. Rook was already in the front seat, running through his checks. I plugged in my comms. My oxygen began strapping in. The crew chief helped secure my harness, then handed me my helmet. All set, Colonel. Good hunting. I gave him a gloved thumbs up. The canopy descended with a hydraulic whine, sealing me in. The world became muted, focused on the glowing green and blue of the digital instrument panels. Rook's voice crackled in my helmet. Storm. Rook. Comms check. Loud and clear. Rook. Storm is 5x5. Ramstein Tower. New York Guard Hawk 01. Flight of 1. Ready for taxi. IFR to Ramstein. With information, Charlie. Rook's voice was calm, professional. Hawk 01. Cleared to taxi via Alpha. Bravo. Hold short of runway 31 left. Winds 280 at 10. Cleared to taxi Alpha. Bravo. Hold short 31 left. Hawk 01. The jet began to move, a gentle, powerful roll. Through the canopy, I could see the Gulf Stream starting its engines. 2 different worlds, departing on 2 different missions. We reached the runway. Rook ran the throttles up. The twin F-100 engines, screaming their fury. The whole airframe shaking with pent-up violence. The tower cleared us for takeoff. Hawk 01, cleared for takeoff. Contact departure on 132.6. Good day. Cleared for takeoff. Hawk 01. See you on the other side. Rook released the brakes. The kick in the back shove of acceleration was a feeling I'd never gotten used to, and never wanted to. The runway blurred past. Rotation speed. A gentle pull. The nose lifted, and we were airborne. The ground falling away with dizzying speed. Gear up. A climbing turn to the east, towards the Atlantic, towards the rising moon, towards a war that was waiting in the ether. I looked down as we banked. The Gulf Stream was a tiny, sleek arrow on the taxiway below, waiting its turn. Somewhere inside, my brother was sitting in a darkened cabin, his world view shattered, heading into the heart of the machine he never knew existed. So, Rook's voice came through, relaxed now that we were in the air. Your brother, he a talker? He was, I said, watching the sprawling lights of New York City shrink to a glittering carpet below. I'm not sure he has anything left to say. Rook chuckled, the silent type. I like him already. Okay, Colonel, we've got 5 hours and 50 minutes of flight time. The data link is live. Let's go save NATO from itself. I activated the secure data terminal next to my knee. Screens flickered to life, connecting me via humming. Encrypted satellite link directly to the chaos in Ramstein. Lines of code, status reports, and the panicked chat logs of a command structure in crisis began to scroll. I took a deep breath of the canned, dry oxygen. Time to go to work. The flight had been a roaring, gut-churning blur of adrenaline and concentration. 5 hours and 40 minutes of wrestling with cascading system failures via a flickering data link, of issuing preliminary orders that were relayed to Ramstein, of listening to the increasingly tense but stabilizing reports from the Joint Air Operations Center, COC. Rook had pushed the Eagle hard, the twin engines a constant, reassuring thunder at our backs. We'd refueled in a stomach lurching, pitch-black rendezvous with a KC-135 tanker over the Atlantic. The boom operator's voice calm in my ear as the giant flying gas station loomed out of the night. Then, more speed, more data, more decisions. By the time the lights of Germany sprawled beneath us and Rook's voice announced, Storm, Ramstein approach. Gear down. Let's go say hello. My mind was a coiled spring, already in the room, already at the map. We landed with a shriek of tires and a roar of reverse thrust. The canopy was barely open before a Humvee with flashing amber lights was racing across the tarmac towards us. A harried-looking lieutenant colonel was in the passenger seat. Colonel Ravenswood. Welcome to the circus, he yelled over the dying whine of the engines as I descended the ladder, my helmet bag in hand. I'm Colonel Shaw, General Shore's exec. He's holding the fort, but it's getting loud in there. Status? I asked, striding towards the Humvee. My flight suit feeling like a second skin. Holding, but just barely. The French contingent is about 5 minutes from walking out. The Poles are demanding unilateral action. The ADSB is still coughing up corrupted data, but your reboot order for the secondary node is at 80%. The Truman Group is still lost, but they've ceased all electronic emissions per your stand-down order. The red air probes are increasing in audacity. I threw my bag in the back of the Humvee and climbed in. Get me to the COC now. The drive was a blur of security checkpoints and concrete barriers. Ramstein was a city that never slept, and tonight it was pulsing with a feverish energy. The COC was housed in a massive, windowless building designed to survive anything short of a direct nuclear hit. The entrance was a maze of blast doors and armed guards. My credentials were scanned, my retina checked. Colonel Shaw practically vibrated with nervous energy beside me. Finally, the last door hissed open, and I was hit with a wall of sound and light. The Combined Air Operations Center was the size of an aircraft hangar, plunged into a permanent, dim twilight. The far wall was a single, vast screen, 20 feet high, currently displaying a nightmare tapestry of the European and Mediterranean theater. Swaths of the map were blotched with angry red icons. The Red Forces. Friendly Blue Forces were a disorganized cluster of blue and green symbols, many flickering or tagged with question marks. Dozens of workstations, arranged in terraced rows, glowed in the dark, each manned by an analyst, an intelligence officer, or a controller. Voices rose in a discordant chorus of English, German, French, and other languages, all tinged with stress. The air smelled of stale coffee, ozone, and human tension. At the center of the room, on a raised platform known as the bridge, stood a knot of senior officers. I recognized General Shore, the deputy commander, from his photos, a tall, lean man with a permanently worried expression that was now etched into a grimace. He was gesturing angrily at a French general with a magnificent gray mustache. A British Air Vice Marshal was speaking loudly into a phone. It was, as Colonel Shaw had said, a circus, a three-ring shit show. I didn't wait for an invitation. I walked straight through the chaos, up the steps to the bridge. My flight suit, still smelling of jet fuel and sweat, marked me as an alien in this world of pressed service uniforms. Heads turned as I passed. Conversations stuttered. I stopped at the edge of the group. General Shore saw me first. His eyes widened in confusion, then dawning, desperate hope. Who are you? Colonel Emily Ravenswood. Sir, by order of the Secretary of Defense and General Walsh, I am assuming tactical command of Operation Iron Shroud. Effective immediately. My voice, amplified by the room's acoustics and the sudden lull that had fallen around us, carried across the entire floor. 100 faces turned towards the bridge. The French general, Général de Division Lefebvre, snorted. A colonel? Assuming command? Say ridicule. This is a NATO operation. We have generals here. This is an insult. I ignored him, locking eyes with General Shore. I pulled a folded document from the leg pocket of my flight suit. The digital execute order had been waiting for me on the data link, and I'd had it printed in the ready room. I handed it to him. The YEXORD, sir, signed by SECDEF, validating my authority as the author of the Counter Crimson Sans 7 Alpha Protocol. You are to place all Blue Force assets under my command for the duration of this incident. Shore scanned the document, his face pale. He looked from the paper to me, to the chaotic screen behind him. I saw the moment, the weight of responsibility, a weight that had been crushing him, lifted from his shoulders. He looked almost relieved. He handed the paper to the British AVM, who read it and gave a tight, approving nod. The command is yours, Colonel. Shore said, his voice formal. What are your orders? The French general spluttered. This is unacceptable. I must protest to shape immediately. I turned to him. My voice was calm, cold, and cut through his outrage like a knife. General Lefebvre, you may protest. In the meantime, the adversary, currently jamming our carriers, corrupting our networks, and probing our borders with simulated Su-35s, does not care about our chain of command. They care about our response. Right now, our response is a debating society. That ends now. I stepped past him, moving to the central command console. I placed my helmet bag on the floor. The senior controller, a U.S. Air Force major, looked up at me, expectant, desperate for guidance. Give me fleet-wide comms, I said. He handed me a headset. I put it on. The chatter of a dozen separate, panicked conversations filled my ears. I hit the master override, a button that killed all other channels and put my voice into the headset of every person in the COC and onto the command net for every Blue Force unit in the theater. All stations, this is Storm Actual. Assume tactical command. Authentication, Bravo Zulu 79er. Acknowledge. A beat of stunned silence. Then, voices began crackling in, one after another, from ships, from AWACS planes, from ground stations. Copy. Storm Actual. Acknowledge. Roger. Storm Actual. Standing by. The response was ragged, but it was there, on the bridge. The generals and admirals fell silent, watching. This was no longer their show. I turned to the main screen, my mind overlaying it with the playbook I knew by heart. Listen up. We are implementing Counter Crimson Sands. Scenario 7 Alpha. Effective immediately. Phase 1. Total sensory blackout. All Blue Force units. Execute comms. Protocol Epsilon. Kill all non-essential electronic emissions. Go to low probability of intercept. Burst transmit only. Execute now. A flurry of activity at the comm stations. Across the vast screen, the flickering, uncertain blue icons began to wink out, replaced by a new set of symbols, duller, simpler, but steady. We were voluntarily blinding ourselves, but in doing so, we were denying the enemy the data they were feeding on. Phase 2, Anchor Points. AWACS call signs Nightingale and Sentinel. You are now my designated anchors. Ignore all ADSB feed data. I am uploading clean, encrypted navigation and IFF data via the Black Swan package now. I nodded to a terrified-looking tech sergeant at the cyber station. He hammered a key. A progress bar shot across a subscreen. You will rebroadcast a localized, clean picture to all units in your spheres. You are the truth. Everyone else, sync to their feed. If it conflicts with what you see on your screen, trust the anchor, not your instruments. Colonel, the British AVM whispered, stepping closer. You're asking them to ignore their own sensors, to fly blind on faith. Faith in a pre-planned protocol. Sir, I corrected, not taking my eyes off the screen. Faith is all we have left. Their sensors are compromised. Ours are not. Yet, I switched channels. F-35A elements of the 48th Fighter Wing. Call signs Venom and Banshee flights. This is Storm Actual. Do you read? 2 crisp acknowledgements came back. Venom, loud and clear. Banshee copies. Venom, Banshee, you are weapons hot. New mission profile is uploading. You are to proceed to CAP station Delta 5 and hold. You will receive targeting data via your anchor AWACS only. You are authorized to engage any Red Force aircraft that penetrates the Blue 9 demarcation line with a lock and look. Show them your teeth. If they continue, you are cleared for warning shots in designated safe airspace. Use of live ordnance on target drones is authorized. Make it loud. A pause. Storm. Venom. Confirm cleared for warning shots. Live fire in the exercise box. Confirmed. Venom. The rules of play have changed. We are now defending real airspace from a real intrusion. Make them believe it. Venom copies, engaging new flight path. Weapons hot. On the screen, 2 clusters of blue F-35 icons peeled away from a holding pattern and arrowed towards the Polish-German border. Their vectors clean and decisive. I continued, command flowing out of me as if I were reading from a script written in my soul. I ordered the Truman Group to initiate a pre-planned, low-frequency, line-of-sight backup comm system. A system so ancient and slow the enemy had likely forgotten it existed, but one that could transmit simple coordinates. I directed a squadron of Growler electronic attack aircraft to begin a very specific, targeted jamming of their own, not against the enemy, but against our own corrupted data links, physically blocking the poisoned information from reaching our systems. It was cyber warfare triage. Amputate the infected limb to save the body. For 20 minutes, I spoke, ordered, cajoled, and dictated. The room, which had been a cacophony, fell into a hushed, focused rhythm. The junior officers and NCOs, the ones actually doing the work, responded to clear, direct orders like parched plants to water. The change was palpable. The panic receded, replaced by a tense, determined energy. From the corner of my eye, I saw a small group of people being led by Colonel Shaw onto the observation deck, a glass-walled mezzanine overlooking the COC floor. Among them, looking shrunken and out of place in his rumpled suit, was Declan. Captain Jameson stood behind him, a silent guardian. Declan's face was pressed almost against the glass, his eyes wide as dinner plates, taking in the scene, the vast, glowing screen of the war, the rows of focused personnel, and me, at the center of it all, a lone figure in a green flight suit dictating the movements of armies and fleets. He couldn't hear the words, but he could see the effect. He could see generals, men with stars on their shoulders, standing behind me, listening intently. He could see the giant map, once a chaotic mess of red, slowly, painfully, begin to stabilize. Blue areas stopped flickering. The creeping tide of red icons slowed, then halted. A senior controller, a German Oberstleutnant, called out, "Storm, the red bomber group. They're turning back. They've broken off their approach vector." A cheer started somewhere in the room, but I killed it with a raised hand. "Quiet. This isn't over. They're testing our resolve. Cyber team, status on the ADSB worm. The Black Swan countermeasures are isolating the infected packets." "Colonel," a young airman called out, her voice tight with excitement, "the corruption rate has dropped to 2% per hour and falling." Signal to the Truman, "Your position is verified. Stand by for clean GPS data in T-minus 90 seconds." I took a deep breath, my first in what felt like an hour. The coiled spring in my chest loosened a notch. The playbook was working. We were turning the tide. I became aware of a presence at my elbow. It was General Shore. His face was etched with a mixture of awe and exhaustion. "Colonel, that was the most incredible piece of command improvisation I've ever seen." "It wasn't improvisation, General," I said, my eyes still on the screens, watching the clean data begin to repaint the friendly picture. "It was a pre-written symphony. We just finally started playing the right notes." I allowed myself one glance up at the observation deck. Declan was still there, a statue. Our eyes met through the soundproof glass. There was no smirk left, no condescension, no pity. There was only a hollowed-out, overwhelming shock. He was seeing the engine room of the world, and he was seeing his little sister at the controls. I gave him the faintest nod. Then I turned back to the console. The French General, Lefebvre, was approaching, his earlier belligerence gone, replaced by a grudging, professional respect. "Colonel Ravenswood," he said, his accent thick, "my apologies. The situation was fluid. Your actions were decisive. What is your next move?" I looked at the map. The immediate fire was being put out, but the arsonist was still out there. "Now, General," I said, my voice cold, "we find out who dared to light the match." The all clear didn't come with a siren or a cheer. It came as a slow, collective exhalation that swept through the COC over the next 2 hours. The red icons on the massive screen retreated to their original exercise boundaries. The corrupted data streams were purged and replaced. The USS Harry S. Truman reported clean eyes. Their navigation systems were back online, showing their true position. The F-35S, Venom, and Banshee flights reported that the probing Red Force fighters had lost interest and returned to their designated airspace. The crisis was over. The war game, utterly corrupted, was formally terminated by NATO command. Operation Iron Shroud was stood down. In its place came the analysis, the blame gaming, the political fallout that would span continents and headlines. But my part in that was done. I had been the emergency surgeon, called in to stop the bleeding. The long-term prognosis and the diplomatic finger-pointing were for others. General Walsh's voice came over the secure line, weary but satisfied. "Storm, you did it. You stabilized the patient. The vultures are circling now, but the patient is alive. Get some rack time. You've earned it." I was in a small, windowless briefing room off the main COC. The adrenaline crash, leaving a metallic taste in my mouth and a deep ache in my bones. A captain from the public affairs office was gently trying to steer me towards a press statement. I waved him off. "No press, no statement. Direct all inquiries to General Walsh's office or the Pentagon." The door opened, and Colonel Shaw peered in. "Colonel, your guest is outside. He's been waiting." Declan. I'd forgotten about him entirely. I nodded, suddenly feeling the weight of the flight suit, the grime, the exhaustion. "Send him in. And could someone find me a cup of coffee that doesn't taste like jet fuel?" A minute later, Declan stepped tentatively into the room. He looked like he'd aged a decade. His expensive suit was hopelessly wrinkled, his tie askew, his eyes red-rimmed and shadowed. He carried himself differently. No more of the arrogant, expansive posture. He was folded in on himself, diminished. He stopped a few feet inside the door, as if afraid to come closer. The captain brought in 2 mugs of coffee, set them on the table, and left, closing the door behind him. The silence was thick, broken only by the distant, muted hum of the COC outside. I took a sip of the coffee. It was terrible, but it was hot. I gestured to the other mug. "Sit, drink. You look like hell." He moved slowly, like a man in a dream, and sank into a chair. He didn't touch the coffee. He just stared at me, his gaze traveling over the patches on my flight suit, the silver eagles on my shoulders, the streaks of sweat and grime on my face. "They're calling you a hero," he said finally, his voice hoarse. "The British officer, the one with the fancy mustache. He said you just executed a masterclass in tactical command under existential duress." He repeated the words as if they were in a foreign language. "It was a job, Declan, the job I'm trained to do." "A job," he echoed, a hollow laugh escaping him. "A job. You just commanded a war from a computer screen. You talked about jamming carriers and shooting down drones and zero-day worms. You talked to generals like they were interns." He ran a trembling hand through his hair. "I sat up there in that glass box. I watched. I couldn't hear, but I could see. I saw their faces, the generals, the admirals. They were scared. And then you walked in, and they stopped being scared. They started listening to you, my kid sister." He finally looked up, his eyes brimming with a pain I'd never seen in him before. It wasn't jealousy. It was shame, profound, gut-wrenching shame. All these years, the admin job, the economy class, the lectures about aiming higher. My God. "Emily, what have I been saying? Who have I been?" I didn't answer right away. I let him sit in it. He needed to. "You were being who you've always been," I said quietly. "Someone who measures the world in visible currency, in tickets and titles and corner offices. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. Declan, it's a valid way to live. It's just not the only way, and it's certainly not the most important way. But I made you feel small, less than." The words seemed to physically hurt him. "You tried," I said with a small, tired shrug, "but you couldn't, because what you were measuring wasn't what I valued. My limit was never a first-class seat. It was the line between success and failure in that room out there. It's the edge of a decision that could save lives or lose them. It's the weight of knowing that the admin work I did at my desk might one day be the thing that prevents a real Su-35, not a simulated one, from crossing a border with live missiles." He flinched. "Why didn't you ever tell me? Tell Mom." "OPSEC, Declan, operational security. The less you know, the safer you are, and the safer I am." And because I sighed, setting down the coffee, because I wanted a place where I wasn't Colonel Ravenswood, where I was just Emily, your annoying little sister, Mom's daughter, a place where the biggest problem was what wine to bring to Thanksgiving. You gave me that. Your obliviousness was a gift, a frustrating, infuriating gift, but a gift. It was normalcy. He was crying now, silent tears tracking through the dust and exhaustion on his face. "I'm so sorry, Ing. I'm such an idiot, such a blind, arrogant, pompous idiot." "Yes," I said, not unkindly, "you were, but you're also my brother, and you're here now. You see it now." "I see it," he whispered, his voice full of awe and horror. "My God, I see it. The money, the deals, the first-class seats, it's all just noise. It's nothing. You were up there, playing a game with nuclear powers, and I was down here judging you for your carry-on. The point isn't that your world is meaningless, Declan," I said, leaning forward. "The point is that they're connected. Your world of finance, of trade, of stability, it exists because the world I operate in keeps the wolves from the door. I sit in the dark, at a radar screen, so you can sit in a boardroom under bright lights. I fly in a cockpit, so you can recline in a leather seat. One doesn't invalidate the other. They're 2 sides of the same coin. You just never bothered to look at my side." He He was silent for a long time, absorbing that. The scales were not just falling from his eyes. His entire visual cortex was being rewired. "What happens now?" he asked finally. "Now, I get debriefed for the next 8 hours. You get put on a plane back to New York. Captain Jameson will escort you. You will sign more non-disclosure agreements than you knew existed. You will not speak a word of this to anyone. Not to Mom, not to your friends, not to your therapist. As far as the world is concerned, you had a family emergency and flew home early from Seattle. And you? I'll be here for a few days, then I'll be wherever they need me next." "Back to your admin job?" he asked, a ghost of his old sarcasm trying to surface, but it died instantly, replaced by a new, tentative understanding. "Back to my job," I confirmed, "which sometimes involves a desk, and sometimes involves that." I gestured vaguely towards the COC. He nodded slowly. Can I say goodbye to Mom? From Seattle. I mean, on the phone. Tell her my work called me away. She'll understand." Mom knew more than she let on. She'd seen the look in my eyes when I came home from deployments, the way I'd sometimes jump at a loud noise. She'd never asked. It was her silent, steadfast gift to me. There was a knock at the door. Captain Jameson entered. "Colonel, your transport to quarters is ready. Mr. Ravenswood, we need to move to make your flight." Declan stood up. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in maybe 20 years. He didn't see the little sister he could tease. He saw a tired, capable woman in a flight suit who had just shouldered the defensive continent and was now thinking about a hot shower and 4 hours of sleep. He didn't try to hug me. He just straightened his shoulders, a pathetic attempt to mimic the military bearing he'd been surrounded by. He gave a small, awkward nod. "Goodbye, Emily," he said. Then, haltingly, he added, "And thank you for what you do. Go home." "Declan," I said softly, "enjoy your first-class life. Someone has to." A faint, sad smile touched his lips. He turned and followed Captain Jameson out of the room. I sat in the quiet for a few more minutes, finishing the terrible coffee. The silence was a physical relief. The mission was over. The mask of Colonel Ravenswood could soften just for a moment before the debriefs began. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I opened it. It was a photo of an airline boarding pass, an economy class boarding pass, for a flight from Frankfurt to New York. In my name, underneath, a message from Declan. "I changed your ticket. It's the least I could do. It's still economy, but it's a start. I'll see you at Mom's for Thanksgiving. I'm buying the wine, the expensive stuff." I stared the message, a slow smile spreading across my face. It wasn't an apology in words. It was an apology in action, an acknowledgement. He wasn't trying to buy me a first-class seat. He was trying to give me back the choice, the normalcy. I typed back a single word. "Copy." Then I stood, stretched the kinks from my neck, and walked out of the briefing room, back into the humming heart of the COC. The crisis map was gone, replaced by a standard training exercise display. People moved with a slower, post-op fatigue. A young airman, first class, walked by, carrying a stack of printouts. He saw me, did a double take, and snapped a sharp, perfect salute, his eyes wide with something that looked like hero worship. I returned the salute, the gesture automatic. "Carry on, airman," I said as I walked towards the exit, heading for the temporary quarters and that promised shower. I passed a large, framed photograph on the wall. It was of an F-15 Eagle, much like Rook's, screaming across a sunset sky. Underneath, it was the Air Force motto, etched in brass, "Aim high." I glanced at it, a wry twist to my lips. Then I looked down at the phone in my hand, at the image of the economy class boarding pass. Asterisk, not so high that you forget where you came from. Asterisk, I thought, or why you're fighting. The weight of the silver eagles on my shoulders felt just right.